and we are live again with another Georgia Music Gamers podcast. I'm so happy that you guys are listening to me right now. And we have a full house in this room. We turn down this volume a little bit. Got some new faces. We have a guy called Dot Phase. We have a special guest of honor, ANDYNUMBERS. And some of these guys you've seen last week. Jahan, Blake was here, Wert, and a couple of people listening in, of course, Porky, and Trek. We'll probably have some more people pop in as the night goes on. That's usually how it works, but we're going to go ahead and let these new folks introduce themselves since they weren't here last week. We can start with you, Dot.
Cool. Yeah, what's going on? Dot Phase. 26-year-old gentleman. I love to play 2DX. I've been playing 2DX for roughly about 14 years. Really big in the rhythm game community. I also stream on my free time playing a whole bunch of various FPS games. I'm a huge Destiny fan. Father, got 2 kids, married to a wonderful British wife. Active duty United States Air Force, and that's pretty much me. I love these guys here, and that's it.
Thank you for your service. Should always start off by saying that.
Yeah.
We
love you too.
Yeah, we love you. He was just in Korea, and thankfully he was sent back. So we're happy to have you back here on the show and back on U.S. soil.
Appreciation.
We're going to be doing hopefully we'll all be meeting again at a convention here in Atlanta called MomoCon. It's going to be a good time. So, all right, next up on the list is ANDYNUMBERS.
Hey guys, how's it going? ANDYNUMBERS here. Let's see, what can I say about myself? I'm 31. I'm definitely one of the older guys as far as, the rhythm game community is concerned.
We have a term. We have a term for that, just so you're aware. We call ourselves the old heads.
The old heads. Yeah, dads. I am pretty much at this point completely retired from all music gaming, but I did, I was the person that started the GAPAN Arcade and, was the guy that was responsible for getting all of those machines for everybody to play on when we didn't really have any machines at all to play on in Georgia. So that's me.
Nice. And the rest of the guys you know. Hey, Cho, you're in here now? Do you have a mic on? Cho's listening, but we can't hear him. Cho's our, here, I'm going to scroll up on the chat here. Cho is this guy over here on the left. I'm the guy on the right. He's a local 2DX player. He came from Korea. He's, I think he's still studying in America. But anyway, he's here to join us as well. So we're going to try something a little bit different this week. I had a crazy idea after the last show, and basically Wert, he's one of our all-around music game players. He introduced himself last time. He was the guy that started playing Bimani. Oh, there you go, Cho. What's up, man?
You guys hear my voice?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
We're doing the next segment here, so just hold on. Give me a second.
Yeah, I was listening.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So Wert, he's more what's a fair word for Wert? He's eccentric. He's
That's
special. Fair, I guess.
That's kind of mean.
I'm not gonna say special, but he's a very unique individual, and one of his interesting things he has that happens to him on a regular basis is he has very interesting dreams. Wert is also really into music, like he's into esoteric tunes, all sorts of crazy stuff, rare tracks if you want to call it that, and I think it would have been a good idea, or rather, I thought it was a good idea to go ahead and give him a segment where he can talk about his dreams in a segment I want to call Wert's Dream Theater. See, right now I'm kicking in the music. You guys can't hear the song right now. So what I'm going to have him do, and I prepared this ahead of time, is we're going to have him describe his dream for us. And as he's doing it, I'm going to place some images into the chat so you guys can follow along and see the visuals that came from his mind. So whenever you're ready, Wert, if you want to take it away.
Okay. So I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I don't know if I need to preface this at all. I mean, there's some characters in this dream that, I Sponge, for instance, I think everybody here is probably familiar with Sponge. I've known him through conventions mostly. Is probably where I first met him, but he's been in like the music game scene for a long time. And he's also very active with Anthony and at Tokyo Attack. So anyway, I had a dream several years ago. I think it was 4 years at this point. That he was bringing a Poppin setup to one of those conventions that we all go to. I've always been interested, Poppin especially. Like, I like to play it when I can, and I think at the time it was much less available. I mean, it's at round one now, but it's not online. But yeah, anyway. So I think I got like a call from somebody, and they're like, "Hey, you gotta come to this convention thing. Like, Sponge is bringing a Poppin setup. It's gonna be real cool." And so I was like, "Hell yeah, I'll be there," because I'll always be there for Poppin. It's my baby. So I went to this convention hall. I remember there being lots of games, but Poppin was not what I expected it to be. So I showed up there, and I should probably also mention that I have a lot of anxiety dreams about wanting or going to play Poppin and it not working out. So this is not the first one. But I show up there, and there's a Poppin setup, but it's not Sponge. It's this other guy that I think we're just going to refer to as the Legend. He's pretty well known around convention circuits. A lot of people, at least, would recognize him if they saw him. And he's well known for not really, like, you would not expect him to have a working Poppin kit. I'll say that. And so I go over there, and much to my dismay, he didn't have buttons. He had cups filled with water that was colored, and you would dip your finger into it to activate the switch. I don't know the logistics of it, but it was not what I wanted.
Oh, really?
So I think I don't know what happened after
I'm keeping
that.
myself muted, so I'm not laughing at everyone's ears.
But yeah, it ended up not being quite the experience I was looking for. I will patent the idea though if I ever can figure out how to make water.
When was it exactly?
This is a dream I had about 4 years ago. I
Yeah.
remember because it shows up on my Facebook feed every year, and I share it every time.
What, the water cup Poppin machine?
That's
yeah,
it,
never
yeah.
forget it.
So that was Wert's Dream Theater.
Play me out.
Absolutely amazing.
Thank you for sharing your dream.
Absolutely amazing. You gotta understand, there's more of these.
Oh
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah, this is just the first go around. We're gonna do this again. So
That was actually a lot better than I expected. I was completely ready for. Yeah, I went into McDonald's and ate some cheeseburgers.
I
No,
do
where-
want to know this though. Were the cups filled with like juice, or were they just like colored water?
I think it was just water. I didn't drink any, so I'm not sure.
Let's see if it's juice. Game over.
His Gatorade, Powerade.
Zyber, who drew those pictures?
So
Those
yeah,
are pretty epic.
I'm gonna give a shout out. It was Kelsey actually. She was posting in the art channel. So I want to give a shout out to Kelsey Draws.
I'm not gonna lie, that visualizes exactly what I had in mind. These pictures.
It's amazing. Awesome work.
So this is her Twitter. I told her I'd give her a shout out, and I'd also. So if you guys want something drawn, she did a pretty good job, I think. So get a round of
Thank you,
applause
Kelsey.
for Kelsey.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, the legend was really good.
There's certain features that are unmistakable.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you, Wert. All right, so with that, we're gonna hop right into the main topic of tonight, which I suspect is gonna take a lot of time because there's a lot of history to go over. But that's why I asked Andy Numbers to come join us. And earlier today, while we were prepping for the show, we were looking through our old photo buckets, and we found amazing photos from, I mean, what, over 10 years ago at this point? It's crazy. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, Andy, if you want to explain your arcade.
I guess it would probably be best to completely rewind and start with, how I got involved in the Georgia scene and everything first.
Yeah.
And then that will kind of lead up to, the formation of GAPAN and, everything since then.
So to give some,
So
yeah,
I
I was
guess
gonna
I'll
say.
start off.
Well, let's give you some background. Like basically, you're an arcade collector, right? And you've collected so many
Yeah.
machines that at one point you had we referred to it as GAPAN, and I'm gonna go ahead and write it down. It was what the locals came to go to play your games, basically.
Yeah, I've got some old photos of the arcade that I can share. I'm looking for a good one that kind of sums it up right now. Like, this is what was, in my house at one point, stuff like this. And then on the other corner, you would have something like this. So basically, the house was just chock full of arcade machines. And it got to the point to where it was just kind of out of control at
Yeah.
one point. I have since, grown up and become an adult and have sold most of those machines. But, we'll talk about the fun and irresponsible times. So I guess I'll start off with my screen name. Why am I called Andy Numbers? Well, the screen name that I used to use, or my online handle, was Andy251203, and that came from my computer name at the time. I had a naming convention that I always named my computers with, and it was Andy followed by the date, the European date, because I was cool like that, of that I built the computer. So
Hipster.
the computer that I was using at the time was December of 2003, so 251203. And that's just what I arbitrarily chose as a username because, I didn't care really. So people just started referring to me as Andy Numbers at that point. Oh yeah, that Andy guy with numbers, a bunch of numbers at the end of his name.
I take some credit for that because I couldn't remember what your numbers were, so I just referred to you as Andy Numbers.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how I got my name, Andy Numbers. At one point, we pretty much just decided let's change my screen name to Andy Numbers, and the rest is history. Before I lived in Georgia, I came from New Jersey actually, and that's where I originally was introduced to DDR, which is the gateway music game, I guess. But I guess the last year that I was living in New Jersey was the year that I really got into DDR. I was actually at Cedar Point of all places in Ohio, doing a band concert for my high school concert band. And the arcade there had a DDR machine. It actually had a DDR Extreme. And I just remember there was this one dude that was playing Cartoon Heroes on double on heavy. And I just remember being blown away by that, like just seeing this guy go, crazy on this machine. So I looked it up, got into Stepmania because I was cheap and broke and I had a computer and excuse me, nothing else.
As most of us did.
I'm going to grab some water real quick because I'm
Go ahead.
losing my voice. Hold on one second.
Yeah, I was gonna say Stepmania was like the tool of choice back then.
And still is.
Stepmania, yeah, it still is, honestly, too. I play a Stepmania mod currently right now.
And every ITG machine.
Yeah, every ITG is modified. But the fun stuff that before, I don't know, we had some discussions about this in the channel before too, talking about like Dance with Intensity and all those other delight replication.
Whoa!
You guys remember those?
Waiver, bro.
Oh,
Mixed Waiver.
All right, yeah, I'm back. But anyway, where was I? Cedar Point, Stepmania. I was into doing it with fingers at the time. And then I got my first DDR pad, which was like a Chinese, one of those ghetto metal pads that came like straight from China. I think I paid like $20 for it. It was awful. And I think DDR Max on the PS2 was my first mix that I actually went out and bought. But anyway, all of that happened like within the last year that I was living in New Jersey, like right before I was moving to Georgia.
And what year was that?
That was the summer after I finished 10th grade, coming into 11th grade. So I had to have been like 16 or 17 at that point. Maybe, oh man, like 2004?
Yeah, we're old.
Or 03 or something?
Okay.
Count backwards from
I
31.
can't math, right? I can't math today.
All right. Go on ahead.
But yeah, okay. So moved to Georgia, no friends or anything, but I really like DDR now. I'm really in the DDR. So let's go look for some machines to play on. So the first machines that I found, I moved to Buford, by the way. The first machines that I found to play on were the ones at the Van Skate Park in the Mall of Georgia. That was briefly a thing.
Shout out to
Before
I
they-
Profession
mentioned that
Freaks.
one last week.
Yeah, last week we talked about some of the old arcades. So.
Yeah, Vans was the first DDR that I found when I moved to Georgia. So I played on that until they closed. And then, I moved on to Peachtree. I'm sure you guys have talked about Peachtree last week.
No,
And,
I should.
Not extensively, actually.
Yeah,
not extensively.
we
Okay.
didn't cover that much, but I should mention.
Yeah.
Andy was into these games roughly around the same time that we were.
Yes. Actually, I encountered people like Hector and John at Peachtree. I just didn't know who they were at the time. I would see them in the arcade, playing DDR and whatnot, but we weren't acquainted or anything at that time.
And I think you also
So
have
it's just-
footage of Wert at Crazy Nichols.
Oh yes, I have to find that, but that's on my other computer. So
That's a whole
I'll have to take a few
video.
minutes to grab that in a bit. But yes, I will share that before the end of the podcast. But yeah, so I was playing at arcades like Peachtree, Crazy Nichols. What else was around Tech Rec while they were still a thing briefly. I was at the very late end of that.
Oh, my stomping grounds.
Right. But that's pretty much it for my, arcade going experience. And also at the same time, I was very much into, I was getting into playing 2DX CS stuff at home. I was very acquainted with a certain website with a mascot of a very fat pig named Cindy. Also, before they were actually a website, they were an IRC channel, and I was into that as well. So, broke kid downloading CD rips of PlayStation 2 games. So, getting into things like Beatmania 5 key, popping music on a DualShock controller, playing the awful CD rips of like 2DX 6 style that would freeze up on certain songs. Really good times. But yeah. Let's see, where do we go from there?
All right, so you're on the site now. When did you start working for that Atlanta collector guy, or working with? I should say.
Yeah. So, that came along later. That was 2011, I want to say.
Okay.
So, I suppose I should also keep touching on, like, at this time, I'm also heavily into, the whole arcade thing, collecting arcade machines and whatnot. That's always kind of been.
I was gonna say you should tell the story of your first arcade machine.
Yeah. Let me rewind a bit and do that. So I've always been, a big arcade gamer, since I was like old enough to know what an arcade machine is, like 6 or 7. My earliest childhood memories would be like going to the arcade, sitting in my dad's lap playing hard driving, because I couldn't reach the pedals or anything on the race car stuff. So I would steer and like he would hit the pedals, and like pole position was the other big like classic arcade game that I have fond memories of. So I always told myself, I think when I first moved to New Jersey, there weren't really any arcades around anymore because this was, kind of at the point where arcades were dying and, they weren't very common anymore. So I always told myself, when I get older, when I grow up and have lots of money, I'm going to have my own arcade. I'm going to have all my favorite machines and everything. So my first arcade game that I got as a kid was Pole Position. We had actually found a somewhat local place that dealt in selling, arcade machines, and this was in the late '90s when you could get them for, relatively cheap. Because it's not like the market is today. Back then, dead arcade games didn't really have any resale value at all. Arcades would pretty much just throw them out when they were done making money off of them. So yeah, my first arcade machine was a Pole Position. I got it for Christmas. I begged for it because, like, when I saw it there, I was like, "Oh my god, I gotta have this! Please get it for me!" And then, I just lucked out. Christmas morning, I didn't hardly get any presents under the tree that year. But when we were done opening presents up, there was a mysterious card that showed up on the Christmas tree. I opened it up and it says, "Go look in the garage." So I went and looked in the garage and there was the Pole Position machine. I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." So I played that for about a year or so. And if you're familiar with Pole Position, it is notorious for breaking down all the time. The game was not designed very well. It was designed by a bunch of potheads at Atari who were, high the entire time in the early 80s. So the machine broke down all the time. We had to call the guy out to come and fix it like once a month. And it got to the point to where my parents were tired of, spending $100 every time we had to call the man to come fix it. So we unfortunately sold it a year later. And I was sad.
And that was the end of arcade games as you know it. No, I'm just kidding.
that was the end of my arcade experience when I was living in New Jersey. But when I first moved to Georgia, I want to say 2005, right when I started to go to college, freshman year, I got back into arcade collecting again. Because at this point, I had spending cash for the very first time. I didn't really have any part-time jobs or anything when I was 18, but for whatever reason, I can't remember, I just had some spending cash, maybe through like birthday money or something. So I decided, okay, let's see if I can buy an arcade machine off of eBay that's local. And I just lucked out and happened to find a Pole Position machine literally like a mile up the road from my parents' house, where I was living at the time. So, I bid it on it. It was like $300 or something, really cheap. And I lucked out and got it. So I got in my dad's van, folded all the seats down, and went there and picked it up and brought it back home. And everybody thought I lost my mind, but that was the beginning, I guess, of, my whole arcade collecting experience.
All right, so
one machine led to another, and two machines led to four led to 8, and so on and so on at that point.
So let's fast forward. So that was your first machine, and then you are now in Georgia. You've been here for a while. You've been collecting machines for a while, and you're working alongside this what was the name of that website?
Oh, Atlanta Arcades.
Atlanta Arcades.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I won't go into details. Like, I've got so many stories of just arcade collecting that I could share. It would be we would be hours on here. But I'm trying to find a good point to jump into with Atlanta Arcades.
Well, we can start where you made that post on that website. I mean, we can go from there.
Right. Well, let me set up a little bit more background first.
Sure.
So at this point, I'm in college at this point. Probably. Well, I guess junior year, but it literally took me 10 years to graduate from college. So as far as like referring to, sophomore, junior, senior, I don't even think that applies to me. But anyway, I've been in college for like 2 or 3 years now. At this point, I am living in a bachelor pad with two of my college dropout buddies. And for historical purposes, we'll call this place the LaCroix place. This is where I used to live. It was off of a street named LaCroix Drive, so I just called it the LaCroix place. That house is actually not there anymore. It's been bulldozed down, and they're now building freaking Soto Sopa townhomes on it. If you're familiar with that episode of South Park where they do Soto Sopa, I like to make fun of that because I really hate
Soto Sopa or Shitipa.
Yeah, Shitipa Town. Yeah, kind of the same thing, I guess. But yeah, I like to make fun of that because I really hate these development companies that are doing this stuff. Building really expensive townhomes and apartments. But anyway, that's the end of LaCroix. We'll go back to the beginning. So I'm living there. This is like I don't have any good pictures of the outside. If you want to see if you can pull up like a historical Google Maps picture.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a 3D image of what the house kind of looked like. It's a Google Maps thing, but that's the house.
So a little background on the house. It is a ranch basement that was converted into two separate living spaces. Like the top and the bottom, have identical layouts. They both have a kitchen. They both have bedrooms and a living room space. And this was all done illegally. This was against the zoning. It was illegally set up to rent to two separate families. But, he did it anyway. And you can kind of see in the picture, the landlord used the land on the house to park his, work vehicles and what. I think that's like a bread van that's parked at the bottom of the picture or something. He had like, this freaking bread van for some reason. I don't know why. But he was a developer and he bought the land because he thought he could flip it. It was a potential commercial. And he thought he could flip it, knock the house down, build like a bunch of stores on the land. But Old Man River, who lived on the right side of that picture on the other side, he fought the zoning and he did not allow them to rezone it as commercial. So Mike, in the end, got the last laugh, though. He was able to do the whole Soto Sopa thing on it, and he got his money finally.
And so Andy's garage is the one that the image is facing. So that open garage in the image, that's the part of the house where you would enter into the house.
Yes. Okay, so it's about 2008 or 9, I want to say, at this point. I'm living there with my two, college dropout buddies. At this point, I'm like fully engaged in hardcore arcade collecting. Like after the pole position, we decided to go, like the three of us go in on a Neo Geo cabinet for the first time. I ended up winning like a big red Neo Geo for $100. It was missing a monitor. My roommate, he bought a brand new CRT off of eBay back when you could actually buy them brand new when they were, still available. And then we bought a bunch of, this was actually when you could still buy brand new unboxed Neo Geo cartridges. I think that's a whole nother story for itself, but I think the last of like the new old stock of Neo Geo games, like what was that, SVC Chaos and Goku 3, King of Fighters 2003, the really late games. Like there was a store that bought them all up and sold them, and like you could get brand new Neo games for dirt cheap. So we got a bunch of those. So I'm just collecting machines left and right. So let's fast forward to, I guess, 2011. Yeah. Right before. Is there any static for anybody else?
Yeah, it's Vince. I went ahead and muted him right quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, 2011. So I started working for this guy. His name was, and he works for a company. Well, company, I say in quotes. I think that's Vincent with the static.
Yeah, you can right click on his name and mute if it's causing too much noise.
Yeah, I'm going to let me mute him. It's kind of bugging me. All right. Anyway, so this guy named he's a real piece of work, and I guess I'll go into that a little bit because I assume he's not going to be listening to this podcast. Basically, he's a really scummy guy, and he's still around today, still trying to flip arcade machines. But his entire business model relies on him browsing Craigslist all day long, and he has like a Jeep Cherokee with like a little trailer attached to it. So he'll do nothing but browse Craigslist all day long, looking for people selling machines dirt cheap, like arcade machines dirt cheap. People that don't know what they have, they just want to get rid of them. They don't care about making a buck. And he'll go and snap all those machines up as quickly as possible. Like as soon as he sees something on Craigslist, he'll go jump on it and bring it back to his place. And then what he does from there is he used to do this himself, but he started employing people like me, and he had a couple of other part-time workers that would convert them into multicades. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the idea is take a machine like Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man, and they sell these bootleg Chinese boards called 60-in-1s that have 60 games on them. So it has like, Pac-Man, all those vertical games, Galaga, Centipede and whatnot. So it was really profitable at the time to take these original machines, gut them, and convert them into.
Oh, did we lose Andy?
Idiot online seeing these things will go, oh, this is a brand new machine and it's got all these games built into it. It's worth thousands of dollars, right? So that was his entire business, paying $100 for a machine, getting a schmuck like me to do all the heavy lifting, gut the machine, rewire it, throw one of these 60-in-1 board in it, throw a new monitor in it if needed, paint it, clean it up, and then turn around and sell it for $2,000 or whatnot. But the guy is just, he was really, and he still is, he's extremely shady, and he's also kind of a religious nut. Like he made these really awkward remarks to me all the time about like how he's like this hardcore Bible reading dude, and everybody else is going to go to hell when they die. And like he can shit on everybody else, and God will forgive him no matter what he does because he reads the Bible every day, and like all of this really insane stuff. But yeah. So let's fast forward. So I'm doing this for a while from him. I'm making decent money doing it. He's paying me a fair wage. He's paying me, I think, about 15 or 20 bucks an hour, and it takes about 6 hours to build out a game. So, it's not bad money. It's just side money that I was making on top of my current job at the time. So, I couldn't complain. It was more money for me to spend on arcade machines. And that picture, I'm sorry. Yeah, he kind of had that douchebag look, like in that picture. But so yeah, I'm spending all my money on machines and stuff at this time. It's also giving me kind of a cool connection because he would give me his leftovers. Like he would just straight up give me monitors that had like too much burn in for him to use in his machines, because he was really anal about reusing monitors that had a lot of burn in on the screen. So I had like literally like 30 or 40 CRTs in my garage, not doing anything because he would just give me all these extra parts and whatnot, and I could turn around and use them or sell them myself or whatnot.
Yeah, and I should mention, like, even though he was amassing these things, Andy was, and he was also selling them too. So he got into the habit of selling parts and pieces he had to other folks.
Yeah, it's become kind of a meme almost that I always say the term "I had it and I sold it" when somebody says, "Hey, do you remember this game or do you remember this game?" And then like almost always, I will come up and say, "Oh yeah, I had that and I sold it."
And so yeah, we talk to Andy and meme him on that exact phrase sometimes, and most of the time it's true. Like it's actually true.
Yeah, it is very true. And unfortunately, the arcade collecting scene kind of sucks now because everybody knows what it is, and there's a lot more people involved now, and prices have gotten ridiculous. But when I first started, you could buy JAMA boards for next to nothing, like things that would go for $500 today. Like for example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, that goes for $500 today. When I first got into the scene, that was a $60 game. So it was just really common for, JAMA boards and game collecting to kind of just go in a circle. You would buy these boards for super cheap, you play them for a while, then you turn around, sell them, kind of just pass them on to somebody else in the community, and then you buy something else. And these boards just kind of circled around in this tightly knit community for a while until the I don't know.
It's the arcade stock market, basically.
Yeah, basically. But I'm getting off track. So let's go back to around 2011. So
this is the big haul.
The last thing that I did for him, the last thing that I did for before he fired me, and we'll get to that too, was he took on this customer, and like this is the thing about is he takes on rich idiots, people with way too much money and no sense. They just want an arcade game in their house or whatever, but they don't know jack about anything. So his latest customer was this rapper. His name was, and he was like this rapper, music producer guy that lived in a McMansion in Fayetteville. And like the guy was never there. Like, he was always, touring, different countries or, out in California or whatever. But, he had a McMansion in Fayetteville and he wanted to put an arcade machine there. He just wanted one of those arcade machines. So apparently the story is, from what I remember, from what told me, is touring in Japan, I guess, or he was just in Japan for whatever reason. And he went to a Japanese arcade and he saw, Guitar Freaks and Drummania. And he said, basically, I want that. I want that, give me that. So, apparently he paid some ungodly amount of money, like $10,000 to bring a Guitar Freaks, Drummania, and an Easy to DJ to his house straight from Japan. But he kind of got gypped on it because like the machines that he got were like in complete disrepair. It was not something that he could simply wheel into his house, plug in and play. Like boards were unplugged on the inside. They were not in a position for someone like him to simply plug it in and play it. So whoever he got those from, he completely got gypped on that deal. So he hired to come fix the machines, essentially. And at this point, he was not living in that house, or he wasn't there. So the machines were delivered to his house, but they were left outside and they were covered with a tarp. And they had been sitting out there for, I want to say, about a month at this point. So he, Googles arcades in Atlanta, and I guess he finds the website. So he calls up, asks him to repair, the machines, and doesn't really know anything about music games. He does the multicade stuff, so he tasks me with attempting to repair this stuff. So we get there, we look at it. At this point, I'm pretty knowledgeable about fixing arcade machines, but this was before Yes, I remember that show, the Easy to DJ chart. I love that, by the way. But anyway, this was before I owned any rhythm games, any, Konami music games or anything. So I didn't know too much about, how to repair a Guitar Freaks or a Drum Mania. So basically what happened was we struck a deal with the guy. We talked to him and said, look, we don't know if we can fix these or not. Let's trade you. We'll take these machines off your hands, the guitar, drum, and easy to DJ, and then we'll give you a multicade instead. And what happened was basically wanted to completely wash his hands of the deal. He didn't even want to be involved at that point. He passed the entire deal off to me. But we used his car, like his vehicle, to transport the machines back to my house. And let's see, yeah. So, and
I was gonna say, do you have any photos of those machines when you came across them? You should probably share them so people can get an idea.
Right. Oh, actually, yeah. So here we go. These are pictures of the machines, like right as I unloaded them into my garage, before I had a chance to work on them or do anything. And they're for being outside, they are in decent shape, and all of the parts were left in the machine. But stuff was just not plugged in. So that's the drum. The guitar looked like this when I got it. Joe, stop uploading stuff.
Sorry.
Here's the back of this was the back of the guitar. So, it was just kind of a mess at the time. And I can't remember if the back door was missing on that machine or not. And that's the back of the drum. So as you can see, it's just a huge mess. That board in the middle, that green bare PCB in the middle of the drum, that is actually an easy to DJ part. So that was thrown in the back of the drum. So
what?
Yeah, I had no idea what that was at the time. All of this was just a complete mess. There's one of the side speakers and the back of the easy to DJ. Yeah, that's the back of the easy to DJ. But everything was there. Everything was complete. It had the this was the board. It had the really rare, e-amusement thing on top, which, in the States, that's very hard to come by at the time. But so basically, let me go back to since he wiped his hands of this deal and he passed it on to me, he still wanted to get something out of it, because the thing about was he whenever we found something that whenever we found a good deal that he would want to share with me, because there was extra parts or whatnot, he would always want to make sure he had the better deal, and then I always got the leftovers. And this one time, essentially, I got the good deal for once, and then he got stuck with the leftovers this one time. So what he told me, what he wanted out of this deal, for the trouble of finding it for me and moving the machines back to my house, he wanted one of the monitors as a trade. He wanted one of the 29-inch monitors, either out of the drum or the guitar machine, just to throw in another one of his multicades or whatnot. So I gave him the monitor in the Guitar Freaks was not original at that point. It was this really crappy, third-party monitor. It worked, but it wasn't great. So I ended up giving him that one. And he took one look at it, and he literally emailed me the next day and said, "You're fired. Come get your shit. Get out of here."
For giving him the crappy monitor?
Yeah, for giving him the crappy monitor. So I was basically screw you, dude, have a nice life. So that was the end of my involvement with that was probably for the best, because, he's, like I said, he was a really scummy person. One thing that he did that really, one of the worst, scummiest things that he has done that I should share. He also dealt in jukeboxes, because jukeboxes go for a lot of money. especially when you find them from people that want to get rid of them that don't know what they have, and then you turn around, clean them up. You can sell them for several thousands of dollars because the jukebox collectors market is like the it's like the pinball collectors market. They're just worth a lot of money. So we had this Wurlitzer jukebox that he got from an old lady. He spent maybe like $200 or $300 on it. It had been in a flood. There was water damage on it, and the speaker at the bottom, like the big woofer speaker on the bottom of the cabinet, was completely brown because it had been caked in mud.
Yeah.
He basically took black spray paint and just sprayed over the mud on the speaker to make it black again, and then he turned around and sold it for thousands of dollars. Like, that is the scummiest thing I have ever seen him do. So if anybody in Atlanta, if you know anybody in Atlanta that's trying to get a multi-cade, just do them a favor, tell them do not go to.
Yeah, we're not trying to promote the website. Just
yes, please do not buy from him. But I'll stop talking about this point because I could go on and on about.
Yeah. I mean,
go on and on
yeah,
forever.
it's interesting, but we gotta get to the actual founding of this arcade.
This is gonna run longer than 10 o'clock. I hope you know that.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. All right, so where are we? Okay, fired me. I've got the Guitar Freaks Drum Mania and Easy to DJ. Oh, and at this point, I should add that I'm not living at LaCroix anymore. I was living at LaCroix. I had gotten fed up with my roommate. His name was Seth, and we kind of had a falling out at the time. So I moved out. I moved in with a fraternity brother. He had just bought this new house. He came from a rich family, and his dad gave him enough money to have a down payment on a brand new house. So he got this brand new house, and he decided, he was going to rent out the rooms to, a bunch of his frat boy, friends or whatever. So I rented the the downstairs room from him. And I subsequently moved all of my arcade machines too. And this dude, he's the kind of guy, he's got a radio voice. If you know, somebody with a really deep voice, yeah, how's it going, dude? But he's this scrawny white dude, with a radio voice. But he's got this attitude, this, let's go do it, oh, this is awesome, this sounds really cool, let's do this. So when I moved in, I was like, hey, I've got a bunch of arcade machines, can I move them into your downstairs lounge living area? And it's like, oh yeah, dude, that's really cool, let's do it. And let's do
it.
Yeah, and I had that was a 65 actually, Wert. That was my dad's
I know it was
old,
super big.
it was a DLP TV. If you remember those rear projection things from back in the day, where you could get a giant TV for relatively cheap because it was a.
It must have been like 10 feet deep.
Yeah, one of those rear projection TVs. But yeah, so I moved all my shit into his downstairs, living area, and then I was in the back room. That lasted for about 6 months until he decided to kick me out.
Yeah, you weren't in there for very long.
I was in there for about 6 months until he kicked me out.
And in that time...
Yeah, in that time, I'll go back to the kicking out part later. In that time, GAPAN kind of started, I guess. It was at this point where...
I would say so.
Yeah, it was at this point to where I posted, online, I was part of the Cindy site. I posted online, oh, I just had this amazing haul of these machines that I got for next to nothing. Check it out. And then Zyber saw it and it was like, oh, hey, you live really close by. We should check you out one day. So that one thing led to another. And then, all of the GAPAN crew, Hector John, Wert, Drew, who else am I missing? I think Ryan was there at the time. anyway, they all came over to the place, and we got to know each other, and that kind of led to the whole creation of GAPAN.
Let me
What
say,
year was this?
hold on.
This was 2011.
I'm trying to censor these images a bit
Actually-
here. No, it was
According
early.
to, I think
earlier
it's
than that.
2009, actually.
No, I'm pretty sure it was 2011.
It would have
But
had
anyway,
to
The
have been after
messages you were exchanging with
2010.
Hector say 11 years ago.
This
No,
was
no,
the
no.
downstairs.
No, 11 years ago was the very, very first thing that because okay, so I should to clarify, this image that I just posted is around the time period that we're talking about now. And if you guys want to look at that image, you can. That was the very first private message I sent Andy after I saw that, hey, I'm in so and so at Atlanta. But previous to that, I'm I'm an admin on this particular site, and I have access to like IP addresses and all that other stuff. And I think what happened was there was a release, and I noticed that somebody was uploading at like a ludicrous rate, like it was completely ridiculous speed, didn't make any sense. And so I found out who it was. It was Andy, and I think, not to incriminate you, I think you were torrenting at work. and,
Yeah.
and so I was just like, hey man, what's up? Like, are you at Tech? Because I noticed the IP address was Georgia Tech. And he's like, yeah, I work in such and such department. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I just filed that information away. Like that was 11 years ago. And so Andy still exists on this site. He still does his wheeling and dealing. He's still trading stuff. He's still, so on and so forth. And then he posts this post that's like, hey, man, I got a bunch of stuff. Got this Guitar Freaks. It's been sitting out in the sun for 30 days and blah, blah, blah. And then I make the connection. I'm thinking to myself, like, wait, I think I've heard of this guy, And I start searching my PMs, my private messages. And I say, oh, yeah, it's Andy. And so I ask him, hey, do you live here? And it's like, yeah, I do, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you should come by. So that message that I just posted was the first connection that I had made. And it's funny.
And like at this point, like I knew who you were, like because I had run into you at like DDR tournaments at Peachtree in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I knew who you were. We just weren't really friends, or we didn't really, we weren't really acquainted at that point.
Which didn't make any kind of sense because had we known that you're so into the game.
I was extremely introverted at the time, so that's probably why I never talked to you when I was at Peachtree.
Yeah, I do remember Hector pretty much saying when he was telling me about this whole thing at the time, like, how do we not know about this guy? Where did he come from?
Yeah, that was, I didn't have a lot of friends at the time when I moved to Georgia because, again, I was extremely introverted and I was terrible at making friends. So, I mostly kept to myself and just played rhythm games by myself.
Oh my god, this is a lot of cabs.
Yeah, that's a list of his games at the time.
I've got more pictures to share. The picture that I posted a second ago, that was later downstairs once I got the cabs all cleaned up. Oh, and the DDR there, I had won like a DDR machine off of eBay and decided to put it down there with the Guitar Freaks and Drum Mania. And if you notice, the bar is bent on the one-player pad.
It's just like Pump It Up.
They freaking drove a forklift into the bar, and they actually bent it forward. So I unmounted the bar and mounted it so you could at least play the game. So it was sticking back. And I actually managed to fix that bar. One of my redneck fraternity brothers had access to like a welder and like an oxyacetylene torch. So he basically just heated it up super hot with this torch and just kind of bent it back in place. And he actually did a great job doing it too. It was almost you couldn't notice it at all.
Quick thing. I know the GAPAN name is kind of simple to figure out how it came about, but like, how did that name come about?
So that name was coined by Bill. I don't know if you've seen the sign, the GAPAN sign. I don't think I have a picture of it.
Yeah,
there's a picture on the Facebook group, but I don't have one handy. But that came later after I moved. Yeah, there it is. After I moved back to the LaCroix place, after the fraternity guy kicked me out of his place.
Yeah, he moved back with
Bill
Seb.
kind of coined the term, and he had his friend make that sign for me. So the name GAPAN is all Bill.
You should probably explain who Bill is.
Bill is Bill Shillito. You may know him as DM Ashura.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah,
Holy
that
shit,
bill.
that's crazy, man. That's
Yes, but when I'm talking about Bill, I mean Bill Chilto, Diamashura, that guy. I've got a lot of old pictures of Bill that I can share too.
Yeah,
if you want to look at old pictures.
we're gonna do an episode with Bill later on. So,
That's amazing.
and we're gonna talk about his history and stuff. So we can save those for another time.
Okay, but here's some more old pictures. This is when I first got the Guitar Freaks and Drum Mania running in my garage. Like this is like I managed to put all the pieces back together, turned it on for the very first time, and hey, look, it still works. And this is when I finally moved them I cleaned them up and moved them into for the first time into that house. So that's kind of what it looked like the first time that people came over. I believe I was running the 1110 at the time in those machines. By the way, here is proof that I did very, very briefly own a Mushihime Sama board before I sold it.
Before you sold it.
Before I sold it. That was back when you could buy brand new ones. They were clearing out stock for like $1,000 or something. And here is like the one time that I kind of had Easy to DJ sort of working, but that's more just for show. I was running the Easy to DJ was the biggest mess of all of them. It was completely missing its computer, so I just kind of threw in a Windows 98 box and just had the bootleg version of the game running on the screen to show that, hey, I can get something on the screen, but it was not playable at that point. I never managed to figure out the wiring and the I/O mess on it, so I ended up just giving the cab away for free on SOS.
And it took a while to convince people to come out to get it.
The guy that took the cab from me, he actually did a really good job restoring it. Sadly, the monitor died in it. It had a really nice 33-inch CRT that was VGA, so you could just plug it straight into a computer and it would work. But between the time that I was out of the fraternity house, but before I moved back into LaCroix, I lived at this random guy's house for about a month. And John might remember that place. He was over there like once. He played Guitar Freaks over there one time before I moved.
Stuff too. Yeah, that was like that lasted
place.
Like a month.
Yeah, that was literally a month. I moved in, and then like 2 or 3 weeks later, I told the guy, "Look, this isn't going to work out. I can't live here." And that's a whole nother story in itself. Why I couldn't live there. But I ended up moving back into the LaCroix place because it was just, it was easy, and I was willing to cut my losses with Seth at that point, and he was looking for another roommate because his other roommates had moved out. So main GAPAN is kind of at the LaCroix place at that point when I moved back in. I got all my machines there, and that's when I got the big stuff 2DX poppin'. So let me share some pictures of that.
And while you're doing that, I'm gonna find. We recorded part of a parody at the LaCroix house.
So let's see. I should share this first.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Before I had a poppin' music machine, I had a ghetto poppin' music machine, and that's I had jokingly called it Poppin' Music USA. What you're looking at is actually a Killer Instinct cabinet. I found one of the arcade guys that I dealt with, not just a different guy that did multicades. He was actually a nice guy. He had a Killer Instinct. It was completely gutted, empty, missing the control panel, and he had a 29-inch monitor that he pulled out of one of those US Naomi cabs, like one of those World Baseball 99 cabs or whatever, the ugly like US candy cab things. Like one of those green cabs. It looks like a pedestal cab, like a Naomi Universal, but it's like an American one. Like they're really ugly. But anyway, he had the monitor out of that, and I basically told him, "Hey, I'll give you $300 if you can somehow squeeze that monitor into that cabinet." And he somehow miraculously managed to do it. And then I took the cabinet at that point. I had that control panel. I bought that control panel from Kin-chan on the forums. and it was just a bare control panel. The buttons are DJ Dow buttons, and the plexiglass and the artwork I did myself. The plexiglass, I cut it from a Home Depot sheet of plexi and drilled out all the buttonholes. And the artwork came from Dow. Dow was actually nice enough to give me the artwork file, and I printed it out on the plotter at work. So like I did that control panel by hand, and the yellow wood that surrounds it, that the control panel sits on, like I did all that by hand. And like that was my ghetto poppin' music cabinet before I had a real one.
And this was earlier. In the LaCroix place.
This was around like either between like 2011 and 2012, early 2012. Oh, yeah, fun time. We had some pretty crazy times at the LaCroix place.
Dude,
that footage sat around for so long.
Oh my god.
that footage was like 3 years before we finished.
I think LaCroix was gone by the time that they
by the time Justin got around to editing that, the house at LaCroix was destroyed. So
I guess before moving on to the later music games, I'll kind of share some other pictures of games that have come and gone through LaCroix. So I'll kind of go through them quickly. This was the nicest Dynamo cab I've ever had. I got this from Rob Ivy in Alabama. I drove all the way down to Alabama to get it. It was like one of the first cabs that I had after the Neo Geo. It was a really nice cab for a Woody. It was in great shape, and I actually sold it to a barber for like $500, and I regret that to this day.
Wait, his name was Robbie?
Rob Ivy. Last name Ivy. He's still active on the forums somewhere. Like he used to be a Neo Geo contributor. His old screen name was 68K because he was like a 16-bit dude. I had a crap ton of these Neo Geo Big Reds at one point. I actually had 4. I don't think I can find the picture. I had a picture of 4 of them lined up like that. I had 2 6 slots, 1 4 slot, and the one on the end at one point. But I don't know if I have that picture anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, the Neo Geos kind of got out of hand after a while.
You can never have too much Neo Geo.
but here's one of the. I think that's one of the. That's.
Frick.
I had 2 of those, so that's another story in itself. I had 2 Time Crisis 2s like that. That's just one of them.
You get
I
that
got
one?
them at the same time.
Frick, bro?
I got those at an auction. I paid $50 for each cabinet. Like I had 2 of those double cabinets, paid $50 for each cab at auction because these things are huge, and nobody wants.
Nobody wants them.
Yeah, nobody wants those things. So I paid $50 a pop for them, and I think I paid the arcade company like $200 to drive them to my parents' house. But those have long been sold. Here's proof that I have owned a pinball machine at one point. Very, very briefly, if it'll load.
That's right?
That's high res.
There we go. Yeah. That I actually got from Scummy. I had a multicade cocktail that I got from another multicade person. I ended up trading it to and he gave me this Xenon pinball in exchange, and it was actually kind of nice. But yeah. What else? I've had some really interesting things. I had this guy was like a little tabletop 9-inch. It was like a little poker game.
Whoa!
What the
but
hell?
I took it and I turned it into a consoleized Neo Geo. The cartridge sticks out of the side.
What the hell, dude?
Yeah, it was I was really proud of it. Like, this is what it looked like on the inside.
Dude, I'm picturing you like taking this on a plane and like putting it on your front tray and just playing this in a plane.
It was really cool, and sadly ended up with all of that stuff because I can't remember why, but I traded him that stuff for something else. He had something else at the time.
Madman.
But I was really proud of it. It was a really cool little tabletop machine.
That is so dope.
Whoa.
I wish I could get it back. He still actually has that machine to this day. He turned it back into a freaking poker machine too, which like makes me sad. But
At least
I
he didn't do
believe.
something like jukeboxes.
Hold on, I bet you I can still find it. I believe it is still on Craigslist.
He's trying to sell it.
Yeah, he's been trying to sell it for like the past 10 years.
What?
How much for
I
a
found it.
jukebox, fam?
You found it?
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Post it.
Yeah, I linked it.
Holy crap!
$500.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah, he's been trying to sell that thing forever.
I'm gonna send him an email. I'll give you 120.
Oh, okay. Yeah, here's an earlier picture. Before I did the Neo Geo, I had two of them playing Kadash, and then I decided to turn one of them into a Neo Geo, like consoleized thing. That was cool. The two-way Kadash. Oh, and this one was really cool too. This was a 13-inch tabletop that I had. That I converted it to just kind of run whatever. I think there's a 60-in-1 in there at that point, and all that stuff got sold.
You still have that Arkanoid?
This is so dope.
No, I sold the Arkanoid.
like the table one?
Yeah, I sold that. I didn't like it.
You put so much work into it.
I did, and then I discovered that playing Arkanoid on a cocktail table sucks. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
This is how we played 2DX when people first came over
Nice.
to
This
to
setup.
Yeah,
this was the
was
original
before
2DX
Illinois.
setup.
I had the
That's
same
some
TV when I
memories
started
right there,
playing
man.
CS.
That TV actually went to Sponge. Sponge took that TV when I decided I didn't want it anymore.
I like the
I had that same
turntable. The
wonder if you
turntable
still have
disc.
Oh yeah, the record on the turntable. Yeah, that was. I remember doing that too because
Isn't that
I
like
wanted
some
to.
Christmas album?
Yes, it was like some country Christmas album that I got for $1 at the Book Nook, and I put it on there because I wanted to like reduce the turntable spacing to make it easier to pinky scratch. And
Oh,
it
I
ju-
thought
it
you just
didn't
wanted it to
work.
feel authentic.
It's like you don't want to wrist scratch, but you don't want to move your hands either.
Yeah,
Wrist.
Make the turntable bigger.
exactly. Yeah, but it didn't work out so well, so that didn't last very long.
Scratch your finger.
Oh, and
You have that controller, arcade controller?
yes. Oh,
Yeah,
here we
yes.
go. This is a picture of that DDR after the bar was bent back. I moved it to the two-player side, but if you look at the bottom of the bar, you can see the burn marks on it.
Holy hell!
Oof.
And I
Is that
bought,
from the
I
welding
bought,
dude?
yeah, that was the welding dude. He bent it back, and he actually did a really good job on it. That was after I refurbished that cab. I got new arrows, and I got what do you call the black things that go over the bar, like the leather
Pads?
Yeah, the leather
Cushions?
pads
Like,
that go
yeah,
on top of the bars.
cushion, yeah.
The bra.
Like, I got all that from I think Arcade Spare Parts or whatnot, and that cab was sold. I think you remember this story, John. That cab was sold to that like 18-year-old from Tennessee that took out a
Oh, that
bank
poor
loan to
sorry-
buy it.
Oh, I remember him. I felt so bad for him.
We ran into him at MomoCon one year, I think.
Oh shit, did we?
I think
Yeah,
the
well,
first
I
year of
remember, I don't
MomoCon.
really know MomoCon, so I don't really.
But yeah, this 18-year-old from Tennessee took out a bank loan to buy the thing from me, and and the reason that I sold it at the same time that I got kicked out of that fraternity house because I was getting kicked out and I needed to downsize quick. So I didn't care who I sold it to. I just needed to get it out.
Which one of your DDR machines came from that grandmother or whatever?
Oh,
that, like...
I'll get to that. I'll
What?
get to that.
Excuse me.
I'll get to that.
Dude, what the?
Oh, the
Hold on,
supernova.
I will get to that.
Supernova, I have very vivid
Oh,
memories
here
of
we go.
that one.
This is the machine that I ended up giving to in trade for all the Guitar Freaks and Drum Mania. He wanted a multicade, so I gave him a multicade.
What the hell? Did you like put Centipede in that thing?
I put a MAME PC in it for him. I actually took out the CRT as well and put in an LCD because he wanted that for some reason.
Well, dude, he's doesn't know anything about arcade machines. Of course, he wants an LCD.
Oh, here's
Bruh.
another view of the 2DX setup. I had the,
Oh,
the
Hell
back.
yeah!
Yeah, this was such a cool setup at the time.
So you
think-
you added a chair?
That is
Yeah.
This, that?
What is racer
I
chairs,
had-
right?
It was a piece of wood, and there were like 2 old computers holding the piece of wood up.
I love how Chuck
Um,
has to bring up
If
the
you
chair.
can see the computer tower at the bottom of the image, like that was holding the wood up, and like I would sit under the table and play 2DX that way. That was when that's another story, but that's when Sirius had just come out on, and like there was the big scandal because the unlocked songs were leaked on before Japan got them, and like super pissed off because of that, and like what's his face? Okay, I'm never sharing data ever again. Fuck all you guys. That was a big mess, if I remember correctly.
I like how we went from vaguely mentioning this site with pigs on it to this.
Sorry.
It's the name
We all
dropping
know what it is. We
Yeah,
all
I
know
know.
what
That
it
out
is.
post, man.
Let's see. I already shared that. Before I had went back to LaCroix, when I was still at the frat house, I had bought a V4 kit that had miraculously popped up on eBay. And a funny story about this kit, it was an Asian kit, not a Japanese kit. And there was both a drum and a guitar kit. Greg had he bought the drum kit. I bought the guitar kit. And in the end, Greg bought the guitar kit off of me so he could have matching kits.
That was a good time. I
Are these
believe.
little Ronnie Caps one that John has now?
Yes.
Yeah.
The GFDM that John has now are these. But do I have pictures of that one?
The
We had another
V4.
GFDM
Yes.
pair, by the way.
I had another GFDM pair. I cannot find any pictures of it though.
Yeah, that's
And
the
I
one
know
that.
I've taken pictures of it, but I don't have them in my collection right now. I'll have to see if I can dig them up later. But during all this time, I had a second arcade at my parents' house. While I was going nuts collecting, so many arcade machines at the LaCroix place, I also had a second set of machines that were going to my parents' basement at the time. Like, this is how ridiculous my collecting got. Let's see. From the time that I moved out of the frat house and back into LaCroix, I had bought a second DDR cab that came from California, actually, off of eBay. That was at my parents' house. I had bought a second GFDM pair from a skate park up in Cumming. That
Was
was
it
selling
second?
it. It was a skate park, like recreation place in Cumming. That was downsizing or closing or something, and I saw it on Craigslist. It was really hard to get because, like, calling the people up on the phone, like, it was these 2 like middle-aged women, and they just did not want to cooperate, or they were super busy all the time. So I kept calling and calling until they finally, agreed to set up a time and have me come and get it and whatnot. But it was a huge ordeal. But that set was in my parents' basement.
And you
I
got
had
the
a
side
5-key
speakers.
Oh yeah, they had side speakers too.
You eventually
which
got
was
the side speakers like secondhand. There was a dude who just like, hey, I have extra side speakers, and you bought them.
No, my side speakers were always with the cabs.
Both of them, really?
Yes, both.
Wow.
The 1110 that came from had side speakers because that was a complete 1110 set from Japan, and then the ones that I got from the skate park, that was a complete 10-9 mix. That was the one. The side speakers were ghetto rigged though. The previous operator, he had lifted them up and drilled screws into them to permanently attach them to the main cabinet so that the whole thing would kind of just move around without having to take the side speakers off. So I undid all that. I took all those screws out. The left side speaker, the one with all the electronics in it, that one was falling apart. So I had to wood glue it back together. It was just a huge mess, but I fixed it all up, cleaned it all up.
Bondo.
And
yeah, speaking of.
and yeah, so I had that second set there. I had the DDR from California at my parents' house. I had a 5-key beat Mania that was at my parents' house. That I got. That was in what's the Villa Rica out 20 West. I I can't remember if that was Craigslist or eBay, but my redneck frat buddy that helped me bend the bar back, he was the guy. I used his truck to pick that up from Villarica. That was at my parents' house, and just a bunch of Woody games, just random Woody caps were at my parents' house. So I had a second.
They weren't even
I had
like
a second
random. Those were like classics. You had like a Pac-Mania and a Dragon Spirit. Like really good
I still
stuff.
have those.
Circus Charlie.
I won't even get into the whole story about the egrets because that's kind of its own episode. Like the whole egret group buy stuff.
That's nuts.
I'm not going to talk about that. So at this point, I'm trying to remember if at one point I had to get rid of all the machines at my parents' house because that's when my grandmother moved in with my parents because she was getting old and she had to have assisted living at that point. So at that point I had to get rid of all the machines at my parents' house. So the GFDM there got sold to I can't remember the guy's name. It ended up at Adventure Time for a while in Augusta.
It was Ryan Rogers, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Ryan Rogers. He bought them. They ended up at Adventure Time, and who knows
Adventure
where they
Crossing.
are today. Yeah, Adventure Crossing, not Adventure Time.
Adventure Time.
That's a TV show.
I was trying to find a photo of those pictures.
I have no idea what happened to those machines after Adventure Crossing closed. Do you know anything, Vector?
The Drum Mania got sold to Nick Pallone.
Yeah.
I think the Guitar Freaks got sold to some other person.
It's a shame they got split up because that was a matching pair.
Yeah, but the Drum Mania at least still exists, along with the DDR that was in that particular arcade.
Yeah, that's good. The DDR that was in my parents' basement, that was a really nice machine, too. That was a Japanese machine in great shape with the memory card readers and everything, like straight off the boat from Japan. That got sold to Drew, and Drew still has that machine, I believe.
Yeah,
right now.
that's the.
Yeah, he does, and he keeps it in great shape.
The photo that we took up there with Bill and
I didn't have to do anything to the pads on that machine when I bought it. Like they were perfect. Like everything was perfect on that machine. I didn't do any maintenance on it.
Was it new or just perfect used?
It was just in really good shape.
That's the cab.
That's it right there. Yeah, that's the cab. Yeah, it was just in really good shape. I think I paid $3,000 plus like $700 to have it shipped from California. And then all the Woodies, just ended up wherever, either sold or back at the LaCroix place. We had the biggest, the hardest thing to get rid of at my parents' house was that 5-key Beat Mania. We had to get that at the LaCroix place, and moving it was a huge pain in the ass because I don't know if you've ever seen a 5-key Beat Mania, but that thing is huge and it's unwieldy and it's just completely awful.
And they're awful to take apart.
They're awful to take apart. You can actually fit it through a single doorway, but it's insanely hard to do because you have to take the whole control box off, and like that basically means disassembling the entire cab and taking out all of the wiring too to do this. So I don't recommend it. But yeah, that ended up.
Real talk, I don't recommend buying a 5-key cab ever.
Yeah, yeah, don't buy a 5-key Beat Mania machine. It's not good. So at this point, let's see, you saw the Ghetto Poppin' cab. At this point, all of the cabs that I have left are, oh, here it is. I found it. Here is the only picture I have of the Tin 9.
Oh, 10th.
Yeah, and they were in good shape. They're Japanese cabs. They were bootleg. They were running bootleg mixes, the software, but the cabs were fully Japanese and they were in great shape. Yeah, the guitar had the memory cards too, which is hard to find.
In the podcast window, I've been playing. People might have seen. It looks like Fire, but in actuality, it's an edit to the song.
Here's some pictures of the 5-key, but they're not great. I think they were just proof that I had fourth mix loaded on it or something.
The beat goes on.
Yeah. You make me wanna get up in the morning.
Hey man, I don't want to get a copyright strike, so you know.
Yeah.
The singing's just too accurate.
Okay, so around yeah, this was 2012 now.
Yeah, that's a typical scene at Andy's house right there.
So
We've actually done several DJ Edo.
yeah, we have.
I mean, you
So I
can't
guess
resist
moving
when there's
on, the story of the me getting the poppin' music in the 2DX cab, that's around 2012 at this point. So in 2012, I don't know if you guys are familiar. You're probably familiar. There was an arcade in California called Arcade Infinity. It was kind of a famous arcade for having like Japanese imported music games and candy cabs and whatnot. I think it was featured in that movie Tampopo Arcade.
Yeah, hold on. I got you, fam.
Okay. Yeah, you're gonna load a picture.
I'm gonna do more than that.
Okay, I'll keep going while you're loading. So Arcade Infinity decided to close its stores in 2012 because they can't make ends they can't make ends meet at that point. So they closed their doors. Their poppin' music machine winds up on eBay, and I don't know what the connection was, but it was being sold by like a car tuner shop and not Arcade Infinity themselves. So I guess they had connections to like a local car shop that was selling the machines for them. But anyway, they had a poppin'. It was on eBay, and at the time that was rare. People are spoiled today because we have hookups from people like Anthony and Ken Chan who can totally get you any machine you want from Japan. Just pay the money and they will happily import you any machine from Japan, no questions asked. But this is before those connections were established, and getting a poppin' music in the States was very hard. The ones that were there were very rare. They were very few and far between. So Arcade Infinity's poppin' music machine is on eBay, and this is at the point to where I'm still living at LaCroix. I don't have a girlfriend or anything, so I've got all this disposable income that I don't know what to do with. Obviously I should be putting this in a savings account or something, but I'm an idiot. So I decided to bid on this thing, and I ended up winning it for something ridiculous like $3,000. And it came on a truck from California. I had to get it delivered to my work because my work had a loading dock, and they would only deliver to a place with the loading dock for whatever reason, I guess to keep down on shipping costs. So it gets delivered to my work, and I should have taken a picture of it at my work. Oh, I do have a picture of it at my work. I don't know if I don't have it handy, but you've probably seen that picture. The very first picture that I posted of the cab was when it was in my office at work.
Oh yeah, when it was delivered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of insane. I've got this pop music machine at Georgia Tech in like one of the labs there. Cool.
That's how.
Right now in my mind, I've just got someone like rolling a poppin' cab into a cubicle.
Yeah, pretty much.
But
that's the
idea.
idea.
But it was wrapped like in bubble wrap, so it was kind of like.
No, I unwrapped it at that point.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I shouldn't have unwrapped it. Going back to, I really should not have unwrapped it, but I did anyway because I was too excited.
Yeah, you were so excited. It's like Christmas.
But yeah, fortunately, one of the my coworkers had a truck, and he agreed to help me get it home. So we kind of just slid it into the back of his truck on its side, and we got it home. And I had a poppin' music at that point.
Thank God. And
yeah. Miraculously, it didn't get scratched up when I had it on its side.
Well, that's the one that you had the monitor wasn't secured, right?
Oh yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, I don't know how in the hell that monitor survived that trip, because the monitor wasn't secured at all. I don't know if you're familiar with how arcade monitors are mounted inside arcade machines. But pop music has what's called a shelf mount style monitor, where the tube is basically it's mounted to like two pieces of metal on the side, and then there's like one wooden board on the bottom that props it up. And normally there's like four big bolts that like bolt the thing down to the cabinet to keep it in place. these bolts were missing for whatever reason. Like this thing was just kind of sitting in there. It was not secured at all. It could totally just, slide around and break the neck on the tube. So like I don't know how, but it survived the trip miraculously. Yeah, there's a good picture right there. I believe that's when I first had it set up. No, I got the race driving later. That was its home, like that corner. That's where it's sat.
Never moved from there.
Yeah,
much.
it was not moved from that corner when I got it. The race driving came later. That's another story in itself.
Let's stick to music games.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But the pop-in. So should I talk about Program World at all?
All right. So I mean, yeah, that's a pretty big. We're over.
That's another thing.
Let's see.
I guess we can talk about that later. But I guess for now, I'll briefly say that the Pop-In has history to it. It was Arcade Infinity's Pop-In machine. It was also the first Pop-In used to test Program World functionality with Pop-In music. Guy who came up with Program World, he used me as the guinea pig test bed to test his network out on. And it was running 18 at the time, the Sengoku Retsuden. Yeah, I think that picture's later. I think that picture was running Sunny Park, but originally I was running 18 in it.
Yeah, see, and now I mean we should, to set the stage really, because nowadays we've got round one, and we've got official Konami EMUs, and that means you can play the arcade games. You can buy a card that links to an account online, and you can save your scores and progress. But during this time,
you have to understand at this time, like there was no arcade Bimani game other than DDR. There were no Bimani arcade machines in Georgia. There were a few stragglers in the past. I know Adventure Crossing had like a 2DX 8th style that was always broken. Vans Skate Park had a Percussion Freaks that disappeared when Vans closed. There were just, little stragglers here and there, but there were no core Bimani games. So, I was kind of filling a void, so to speak, at the time. I already had the GAPAN regulars coming over all the time to play Guitar Freaks and Drum Mania. So, I wanted to add to that. I wanted to get the rest of the Bimani collection in there so everybody could start playing those games too. So now at this time we had Pop-In. I lucked out and Arcade Infinity threw up what was going to be their second 2DX cab on eBay. I don't know what happened to their original 2DX, but they were planning on adding a second 2DX machine to their lineup, and as soon as they got that machine in, that's when they closed. So that machine also went up on eBay. I freaked out when I saw that because, again, at the time, just like Pop-In, but even more rare, you never see a 2DX on eBay, right? They're as rare as it gets. So of course I go crazy and I get this thing. I pay a ridiculous sum of money for it, but at the time I considered it to be worth it because 2DX is unobtainium. You're not going to get one in the States at the time. But I miraculously got it.
Well, specifically on the East Coast. Let's just say that.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Because the West Coast was ridiculous with the amount of just
you
shrapnel.
Have Sunnyvale, Golfland, all the stuff coming from Japan to California. The West Coast is spoiled when it comes to Japanese imports, but the East Coast, doesn't get anything. But yeah, so the first 2DX in Georgia, aside from the 8th style ghetto one at Adventure Crossing. So it's a big deal when I get it in. And hold on, I have a picture. Blake posted one, but I have a good one that I wanted. Oh, this is the very first picture that I took of this cab once I got it set up and in my living room. And that is Ryan Henningsen on the cab.
Shoutouts to Codemaster.
Yes.
He's coding out.
Yeah, that is the very first picture of it. So
shoutouts to Serious Pops and Resort Anthem Marquee.
You still have
That's
the
another
Resort Anthem
story in
item?
itself. I bought a Resort Anthem kit like when Resort Anthem was still relevant, but it only came with the marquee. It didn't come with the pops. So when I bought the cab, it was a Sirius cab. It came as a Sirius. But I had bought a Resort Anthem kit, and I paid a lot of money for that Resort Anthem kit just to play it currently at the time. That was back when you could still pay $3,000 and get the latest version. It wasn't a subscription service like it is now.
Yeah, it can't be understated. Like Andy really did pour a lot of his time and effort into maintaining these machines and allowing us to come. He was very, very welcoming to his place. Like we can't thank him enough for that. Because I mean, if that was me, I'd probably have people over once a month. But Andy was like every weekend. Hey, Andy, are you busy? Can we come on over? And we'd have a party.
Sometimes
basically.
more than every week.
Oh yeah, we had I had people over every day sometimes, but you have to remember that this was back in the bachelor pad days where it was not a. I was only working for the most part. I was still doing a co-op position, so like every semester I would swap between working 20 hours a week and 40 hours a week. So I had a lot of time where, I had a lot of free time on my hands, and I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. So, if people wanted to come over, they could come over whenever they wanted to. It was not a big deal at all to me to just have people over whenever they wanted to come over. I had a very open house at the time. And I guess this is kind of core GAPAN right here. Once I had the 2DX machine, this is at the peak.
This is probably the golden era.
Yeah, and the only thing the icing on the cake was this DDR machine in the picture right here, and you can still see the Easy to DJ in that picture.
That machine.
That machine. I'll briefly go over this story because it's a good story to tell. So this machine that you're looking at, it's a Betson Supernova. It's one of the US cabs, but it still has, it has good pads. It has those Korean built pads that are still built to the proper Japanese spec. It doesn't have the crappy pads that the later Betson X and X2 cabs had. But this machine was a home use only machine. A very rich grandmother living in Buckhead bought the machine straight from Betson, paid 15 grand.
Really? I didn't realize.
A very rich grandmother
Their
bought
basement
it.
was lit, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah, like they had a full game room, like a high-end game room in their basement, like with some really expensive machines.
This is wait. This for her kids or for herself?
For her kids. Like she had grandkids. So I'm guessing she paid, probably $100,000 to have somebody come in and deck out an arcade for her grandkids or something.
Golly.
Yeah, like it looked like like a Dave and Buster's in her basement, basically. Like she had some like high end stuff down there.
That's crazy.
So yeah, she bought this game straight from Betson to her place, brand new, $15,000. Grandkids barely even touched it. If I remember going through the high scores that were saved on the songs, the only high scores that were saved were on like light charts. There were no high scores on any medium or heavy charts. So like, the thing had barely been touched. She sold it to me for $1,500 or 10% of the original price.
That is a steal.
God. What a loss.
Yeah. Because she just wanted it out of her basement at that point.
Yeah, well, there was no good way to get it out, though.
Yeah, that was an adventure in itself because it had to go through her backyard and it was all muddy. And fortunately, she had these gigantic wooden signs. Like, if you go to a high school baseball game, you see those like wooden billboards on the back side of the play field that advertise all the local businesses. Like those are wooden boards. For some reason, she had a bunch of those stacked up in her backyard. So we used those to wheel the DDR out on, because otherwise it would just sink in the grass and the mud. But we had like 2 or 3. So we like put 2 down. We moved the cab like one sign distance forward. We took the back one, put it in the front, moved it a little bit more, put another sign in the front, and then moved it a little bit more, until we finally got the whole thing in John's truck. And yeah, it was hell, but still it was worth it for that cab. I still have that DDR right now.
Yeah, it was worth it. It's a good cab still.
It is a good cab.
Well, Dot Phase is peacing out. We should go ahead and say goodbye. Good night, Dot Phase.
All right. Well, I'll start to wrap up because that's pretty much it as far as the cabs. At this point, I won't go into the reasons of why I left LaCroix, but a bunch of things happened. I left LaCroix. I'm now living in Kennesaw. Most of the extraneous machines have been sold at this point. Poppin's been sold off. I'm in the process of selling off 2DX. But with me living where I am now and everybody just being a lot older and everybody having careers and jobs and children and families now, GAPAN just is not, what it used to be. People don't have the free time anymore to hang out. So, and round one has pretty much the coming of round one and the end of program world has kind of killed off the need for GAPAN. So I'm still around, but those golden era days are long gone at this point.
Now it's up to my generation to buy a bunch of cabs and put them in a house.
Yeah.
It's time for you to be fiscally irresponsible.
Right.
Well, you know what they say, cabs are just savings accounts you can enjoy.
That's what they say. Who said that?
I guess it depends on how much you put in.
Well, you have to understand one of the big appeals, one of the great things about GAPAN was Program World. With Program World, we had the ability to get the latest arcade data that Japan had. So whatever latest music mixes were out were the ones that I had, and we don't have that ability anymore. So
wow,
if you
so
decide,
N-0 is a big thing then?
What's that?
So N-0 was like all around then?
Only to certain people that had cabs. The rule was you could get N-0 if you had a legitimate cabinet.
Yeah.
If you just had like a home setup, you had to stick with N-1 data.
And the issue, I mean, as most people know, Konami started sending out cease and desist letters to several key figures that were running.
Right, and that was because of round one coming. Round one is a blessing and curse. Round one is great because now we have legitimate current music games available in the States. But with that comes the death of these bootleg, underground home arcades.
Yeah, and the other thing was, it was N-0, but as Andy mentioned earlier, there were times where, we found out about songs before they were actually officially available in Japan. And as a result, Japan actually changed how they distributed songs onto their arcade game.
Right, with Sirius and before, whenever a new version of 2DX came out, all of the songs that would ever be unlocked were already preloaded on that hard drive, and it was just a matter of setting the unlock code to view those songs. And that data was not encrypted or protected in any way. So as soon as that game came out in Japan, we had access to that data. We could, immediately leak those songs and show Japan, the songs that they weren't supposed to be seeing yet. Once Resort Anthem came out, they started slowly switching to a DLC method where they would actually roll out new content, new songs over the internet. So you couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, and it was as simple as like the sound data was on there, but you would download the charts basically, and then the charts is what then would.
At first, it was that way, but once games like Tricoro came out, it was full DLC at that point.
Yeah, full songs. So yeah, because of what us Americans were doing, Japan switched their
yeah, we helped shape Japan.
So obviously this was before I was like around in the arcade community, but when did the cease and desist drop?
That was around when we had Pin Duel, when Pin Duel was out in Japan. So 2015, I want to say.
Yeah, it was either 2014 or 2015.
Late 2014 or 2015. I remember
everyone's saying 2014 in the chat.
Okay, yeah, we were kind of late to getting Pin Duel data on Program World. Usually we get it right off the bat, but I think we were like 3 or 4 months late compared to Japan. And I remember finally getting Pin Duel data. We played it for about a month here at Kennesaw, and then the cease and desist came, and that was it. Like we had one final day, like PW was shutting down the next day, so like we had one final day. We played Pin Duel until the server went offline and the game shut down.
That was a scary time too, because nobody really knew what Konami was going to do. I mean, it turns out, like, you know, we found out later that Konami was just like, "Hey, don't do that, guys," but and like, they didn't really press charges or anything, but it really was.
That was when Program Sun went completely underground and whatnot. So
well, nowadays home networks are a dime a dozen. I mean, I'm not even sure how many there
we
are
have now and whatnot.
That's not even that's not the extent of it.
The tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, there are so
like
many.
I know there's also for the machines again. That's
okay, well,
kind of
we
own thing.
We don't need to name drop these systems.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is there's a lot more than you realize.
Yeah, because I mean there are like 100,000 different ones that people are running, like the actual cabs, and I mean it's probably better that way 'cause it's decentralized.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's kind of like the day. It kind of comes full circle if you think about it, because we had a program called EMU, which was like a home server emulator at the time before there was Program World or Program Sun or anything. So you just run your own server at your house, and it's kind of, you know, that is essentially coming back at this point.
Oh yeah, I'll stop talking about this.
yeah. I'm gonna ban each and every one of you guys.
That's pretty much the GAPAN story. I have a bunch of like little side stories that I can share later, but that's kind of the core GAPAN story.
We're pushing on almost 2 hours here, so
yeah.
Are there
probably
it's quality though? Definitely.
If anybody has any questions they want
to
ask,
are there any questions that you guys have?
This isn't really a question, but I just want to say, like, if you could ever do another one of those golf tournaments, because someone sent me some of those videos on YouTube, please tell me. I really
we
want
are
to play
having
that.
a golf tournament on the 14th.
Oddly enough,
next weekend
of April.
Yeah.
Yes.
Come on down.
Not this Saturday, but the next Saturday. If you want to come on down.
All right, I might.
There are prizes.
Yeah, we'll
dope prizes
for the podcast. I'm not gonna place the event info here, but if you guys are interested, you can message myself or Andy, and we can give you some details. So
send me a PM.
Yeah, send Andy the PM after here if you guys are interested in coming.
You know, maybe.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
It was super fun last time we did it.
Yeah, Andy's actually giving. Do you have a photo of the prizes, Andy? If you want to post them up.
Yeah. Let me grab that real quick.
Andy's been going a little crazy with the setup for this one. It's Neo Turf Masters / big tournament golf / I don't even know how many names. It's the game that came
out. Neo Turf Masters or big tournament golf. It's just those two.
Came out on Switch, and so but he's set up a couple sit-down cabinets and this ridiculous like 5-monitor multi-monitor display big tournament golf, and somehow he managed to get his hands on a Nazca golf visor. So
I love that.
That's custom made.
Oh, it is? Okay, I was gonna say.
I had that custom made. The shirt looks like this. It's amazing.
If I don't win that shirt, I'll buy one.
Is it going to be the GAPAN gift shop outside the tournament?
No.
Nah, dog, you got to win. Which means you have to be Andy.
Oh, dude, I'm going to lose.
That game is so good, man.
Andy's been practicing, so if you have a Switch, you can download it now. Better practice.
But Andy always wins, right?
Not always.
So about that, I really don't want to win this time, but I will be participating. I am going to self-impose a handicap. I will only be playing Fernando the entire time.
Brazilian poets.
Not Fernando Almeida.
Yeah, I will only play as Fernando this time around.
So you have a chance.
So for people who don't know, Fernando Almeida is the character that has maxed out power and nothing in every other stat. He has all power and no control, no recovery, nothing else.
He's the one who can one-shot a 5-par, but like...
Indeed.
So yeah, that's
if you have time, hold on, let me get the link real quick. If you have time, please watch the old videos from the last tournament. I have them on my channel.
Yeah.
They are fantastic to watch.
So actually, quick question: are we actually going to play Neo Geo CD again?
Yes.
Yeah,
if you read the rules, the finals
I haven't actually
are
had a
on
look at the
Scotland.
finals on. Oh my god. Okay.
Please,
The
if you have a
worst one.
chance, practice the Neo Geo CD version on an emulator. It has a 5th secret course called Scotland. It's insanely hard. You will definitely want to practice that.
It's got like ridiculous floating waterfalls and all sorts of dumb.
This is the miracle shot. If you play this video at this time mark, I pull off a miracle shot on Scotland for the finals right here.
You can see my huge belly in the background. All right, let me play that. I'm gonna play it for the folks on the stream with audio.
I was about to say, do you guys want to start to like wrap it up and start to talk about this in the after party?
Yeah. We're getting way off topic here.
That's ridiculous. You got an eagle. Wow.
That was a miracle.
All right, well, yeah, I think now is a pretty good time. We've been going for an hour and 45 minutes, which is not
almost
bad.
2 hours.
Not bad for our second show. There's a lot of history here, so part of the reason why I even started this was so I could actually document this information for, the people who might not have known. And we have a pretty good distribution of old heads and new kids in here, so it's kind of nice to see. So I appreciate you guys all coming in to listen. And of course, Vince is a pump player.
Pump.
Yes. I was going to ask. Well, are you going to be coming to MomoCon, Andy? Are you planning on coming?
Probably not, honestly. I came last year for like 3 hours to do a Splatoon panel that Alex tasked me to do because he had to back out at the last second. After doing that, I went to the dealer's room for like an hour and then I left. So I probably won't be doing MomoCon.
I've got a question real quick.
Go ahead, Wert.
I've got a question before we end the podcast. Is there one machine that you have that you would never get rid of? Like,
well, I originally said I would never get rid of 2DX. I famously said that I would be buried with my 2DX, but here I am selling it right now. So I guess that's not true. As far as what I have left that I do not plan on ever selling, I have no plans to sell the DDR. At least no immediate plans to sell the DDR, even though I don't really play it anymore. I just like having it. I don't really have a I explanation as to why I want to keep it.
It is the third one that you bought, so.
Yes, it is the third DDR machine. I don't know if I have kids one day and they want to play it, it would be nice to have for that, I guess. That and my Candy Cast, my 3 Egrets and my Aero City, I don't ever plan on selling those.
Yeah, I think Hector told me a couple podcasts back, like how you had 3, but you sold 2 and you regretted it both times.
I had 5 Egret 2s and I sold 2 of them, and I regret that.
What about the race driving?
I still have. I will probably hold on to that. Race driving and Stun Runner also. Those games are, they're not worth much money. Because they're not particularly collectible, but I have a soft spot for those games because I played them as a kid. Same with Pole Position, I have a soft spot for that game too. So those cabs are all pretty much keepers. The only cabs that I still have that I will probably, try to sell is the red Neo Geo Woody cab and possibly the Dragon Spirit, but only because I don't really play Dragon Spirit.
Nice.
Everything else that I have is, I believe I will, keep at this point.
All right. I see that Tommy joined us. Did you have any questions, Tommy? Kimono Boy up in chat. Do you have a mic?
Dad.
He probably can't hear you.
No.
Thanks.
Just wanted to listen.
Appreciate it. Yeah, people have been coming in. Dafty came in, and Vince
Yeah,
came
my
in.
bad. I came in late.
No, it's all good. We ran over today, but it's not a problem. All right, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show. It's been very informative. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. I'll go ahead and upload this as soon as we're done here. But yeah, I want to thank Andy again for taking the time to explain things. Hopefully, you got some water while you were explaining, because you certainly talked a lot. There's a lot to go over.
I grabbed the Coca-Cola. That helps my throat a little bit more than water.
Nice. But yeah, seriously, thanks, and thank you for everybody else who's listening. I'm gonna go ahead and try this out. Appreciate the screen caps.
Classics.
I'm gonna end on this theme song here. Hopefully, yeah, go ahead.
Does anybody else miss Goalie's old artwork?
Heck yeah, man.
Yes. I hate it when he went full anime.
I don't miss like the second style, third style era, but like 6th through 9th, I would say, is what I really miss.
I like 9th.
Yeah, but
9th
check out that Rocket Boy over there.
I love the second style artwork.
Dong Tipo. Number 1. All right, well, it's been real. Thanks, guys. Everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
Later. And we'll see you guys next week.
Yep.